Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time of flickering torchlight. Long wooden tables sticky with spilled ale and steaming pots of mystery stew simmering over smoky hearths. You're standing in the great hall of a medieval manor somewhere between the end of the Dark Ages and the cusp of the Renaissance. The air smells like burnt fat, damp wool, and just a hint of something that might once have been a turnip. You're hungry, but in this era that's more of a danger than a discomfort. Because dinner tonight might kill you. And no, that's not a metaphor. A hunched servant ladles something grayish into a wooden bowl. You peer in, uncertain whether it's soup gruel or a failed attempt at boiled fish. You reach for a chunk of bread. If you're lucky, it's only stale. If you're less lucky, it's laced with a neurotoxin. Bon appetit. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in medieval Europe now, somewhere rural and damp, but not too far from a village. The fire smokes constantly, and nothing ever seems truly dry. Most meals happen in the same room you sleep in. That's if you're lucky enough to live in a house at all. Many still eat under thatched roofs where animals and humans coexist with cheerful indifference. Chickens strut through the muck. Pigs snort around your ankles. Your table, if you have one, is roughly hewn and perpetually greasy. Tonight's dinner is pottage, a stew of water, barley, maybe a few beans and anything else that hasn't rotted completely. It's always pottage, really. Sometimes thicker, sometimes thin and sour. The flavor varies with whatever's barely clinging to edibility. You eat it with chunks of bread so hard, you could hammer in nails with them. Still, you're grateful, because some nights there's nothing at all. Food preservation is a game of luck, salt smoke, and prayer. Cold cellars help if you're rich. Otherwise, it's barrels hanging meat from beams or digging holes to hide perishables in the dirt. Spoilage isn't a failure. It's a way of life. People eat things we'd throw away with a gag today. Cheese crawling with mites aged to perfection. Bread tinged pink from mold. Probably just holy bread. You whisper grace and take a bite. Of course, the wealthy eat differently. If you were born with a crest on your doublet, you dine on pies stuffed with pigeon or boar roasted whole and dripping with fat. But even then, your odds of survival don't increase much. Wealth brings excess, and excess brings gout, rotten teeth, and poisoned feasts. Lead-based glazes on plates and goblets leak into food and drink. Spices shipped from the east. Cloves, cinnamon, black pepper are worth more than gold and used not to enhance flavor, but to mask decay. A spoiled fish doused in saffron and vinegar. That's fine dining. And don't forget bread. Bread is life, but it's also death. Most peasants eat rye, which in a damp summer can sprout a fungus called ergot. You chew, you swallow, and hours later, your hands cramp into claws. Your skin burns with invisible fire, and you hallucinate demons dancing in the corners of your hut. Some call it St. Anthony's fire. Others call it a curse. No one suspects the bread. Markets offer some options: salted fish, dried fruits, maybe a wedge of questionable cheese wrapped in cloth. But sanitation is non-existent. Meat hangs in the open air, buzzing with flies. Butchers work with unwashed hands, knives wiped on aprons, dark with old blood. Rats are more reliable than priests. And what the market doesn't sell today gets reheated tomorrow, or the next day, or the one after that. A suspiciously sweet smell in a stew could be cloves. could be decay. Even the water is suspect. Wells are better than rivers, but both carry the risk of disease. Boiling helps, but fuel is precious. Many drink small beer, barely alcoholic, brewed just enough to kill some bacteria. Children drink it too. It's safer than water and cheaper than dying. You eat what you can when you can. Fasting is common both by religious mandate and grim necessity. During Lent, meat is banned, so is dairy. But clever cooks skirt the rules. Almond milk stands in for cream. Fish exempt from meat laws becomes a daily staple even if it's salted into oblivion or dried until it cracks. Eel is a favorite, slippery, boneless, and easy to catch. It wiggles even as it dies. Feasting is another matter entirely. On holy days or weddings or coronations, the tables groan with excess. There are subtleties, sculpted jellies, roasted peacocks, redressed in their feathers, sugar-crafted castles. These are not meals, they're theater. Displays of wealth and artistry designed to impress, not nourish. Guests watch more than they eat. The most elaborate dishes are often inedible, sculpted from dough or plaster or gilded nonsense. And yet, amidst the rot and ruin, there's ingenuity. You notice how people make do, how they stretch flavors and time. Herbs from the garden, sage, parsley, dill, try to push back the taste of age. Vinegar becomes the cook's best friend. You learn to appreciate sourness as a sign of life. Sharp cheese, pickled onions, green garlic. Things that bite your tongue remind you you're still alive. The kitchen, for all its fire and smoke, is a sacred place. Women mostly run it. They stir pots, grind grain, hang herbs from beams. Their knowledge is passed down like scripture. How to tell when milk is safe. How to rinse maggots from meat. How to salvage a stew that smells off. You learn from them slowly, reverently. Because food here isn't just sustenance. It's survival magic. You're handed a hunk of something. It's brown fibrous and smells vaguely of dried plum and old shoe. Fruitcake, someone says. It's dense enough to stop a crossbow bolt. But it lasts forever. You take a bite. It doesn't taste good. But it doesn't taste bad either. That's enough. Outside, the fields are quiet. Wheat, barley, cabbage. Turnips buried in straw. Sheep chew cud near the fence. You walk slowly, holding your belly. It's full, but not satisfied. You're never really full here. Not the way you remember. But this is your world now. And tomorrow's meal is already fermenting in a pot by the hearth. You glance at the sky. Stars peek through smoke. A chill wind rattles the shutters. The night smells like wood smoke, sweat, and cabbage. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak and wonder what's for breakfast. It'll be rough bread again, bread. Maybe beer. Maybe dried peas boiled into mush. But who knows, someone might have caught a rabbit. You'll find out when the sun rises. And if the bread doesn't poison you, it might just be a good day. Morning is slow and damp. Your blanket, if you had one, is little more than coarse wool and the warmth of your own breath. A rooster crows somewhere, though he's off-key and probably half-starved himself. You push open the wooden shutter and peer into a low fog rolling across fields of clumped earth and stubble. Your stomach grumbles, not with the eager anticipation of pancakes or toast, but with the wary dread of whatever is still left in the pot from last night. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is a continuation. No fresh beginnings here, just more of the same. A cold lump of pottage perhaps scraped from the edge of the cauldron. You spoon it up now, gelatinous and congealed, the flavors dulled to a sour earthiness. Still, it's filling, and that's what matters. Your bread is on the harder side of stale. You knock it against the table to test its resilience, it wins. You soften it in the beer, which is barely more than cloudy water and fizz, but it goes down easier than the well water, which might be hosting a full spectrum of invisible perils. You chew slowly, training your tongue to ignore the sharp little crackle that might be grit or insect. Hard to say, really. In the daylight, the kitchen seems more brutal. The ash clings to the corners, and the rushes on the floor are fragrant in all the wrong ways. A fishtail peeks from a heap of discarded trimmings, scales glittering dully, and its eye has long gone milky. You step around it and head outside. The garden offers a bit more hope. There's green here, leeks, wild garlic, young mustard leaves. You pluck a few, wipe them on your tunic, and chew. Peppery bright. Alive. These little sharpnesses are what keep people tethered to their senses. But they're fleeting. Winter's long and dried herbs only go so far. If you're lucky or pious, today might be a meat day. That depends on the calendar, which is crammed with saints and seasons. The church dictates when you can eat flesh and when you can't. Fast days come often. Wednesdays, Fridays, Lent, Advent. Then there are ember days, rogation days, vigils. You lose track. The church calendar is a strict dietitian, and the punishment for disobedience isn't a lecture, it's eternal damnation, or a hefty fine, which is basically the same thing. But on feast days, when meat is allowed, it still has to be found. You don't just pop out to the shop. Someone has to trap it, hunt it, or raise it. Boar is a prize, but wild and dangerous. Rabbits are good if you can find them before the Lord's gamekeeper does. And birds? Birds are everywhere. Pigeons, starlings, even sparrows. A net, a rock, a bit of luck. And then the plucking begins. Feathered things come with a particular scent when their guts are opened sharp, coppery, with a tang of bile. You learn to clean them quickly. If the meat is questionable, you'll boil it twice, then stew it in ale or wine with onions and garlic, and hope the strong flavors outrun the rot. Preserved meat is a separate affair. Salted pork especially is common. You chip off a bit from the hanging slab in the pantry. It's dry and stiff as leather. To eat it, it needs soaking sometimes overnight, sometimes for days. You do this while watching the color bloom back into the meat like a memory returning. Then it's boiled, and boiled again. Only then is it judged edible. But preserved doesn't mean pure. Salt draws out moisture, sure, but not always the bad. Worms and larvae are stubborn little guests. You scrape them off, pick them out, and carry on. The flavor is metallic, intensely salty, but familiar. And safety here lies in familiarity. You think of butter, sweet, yellow, smooth. But the butter of your world is white, coarse, and often sour. It separates if not churned properly, goes rancid in the heat. Some people prefer it that way, claiming the tang helps digestion. Others just hold their breath and swallow. Cheese is better. It's what milk becomes when it's old and lumpy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Hard cheeses keep longer. Moldy ones are trimmed with a knife, and the rest is just fine. You chew slowly, letting the flavors coat your mouth. Strong, sharp, almost acidic. It burns your tongue a little, but it fills the belly, and that's enough. Then there's the sweet tooth, dangerous and delicate in the medieval mind. Sugar is a luxury, a rare import from the East, used sparingly. You don't crave sugar because you rarely know it. What you have is honey, local, coarse, unfiltered. It smells of flowers and smoke. A drop in porridge, a drizzle on bread. That's dessert. Some sweet dishes are odd. modern standards. Apple pie with beef fat, pears stewed in red wine and vinegar, a kind of custard thickened with fish gel. Sweet and savory blur easily. You learn not to question combinations. If it tastes like something and doesn't kill you, it's a win. You pass the tavern and peek in. The scent is overwhelming sweat, smoke, boiled beer. A pot hangs over the fire, its contents unidentifiable but bubbling merrily. You're offered a bowl for a coin. You take it. Inside is a mix of barley-dried peas, possibly mutton, and an egg cracked in for good measure. It's gray, lumpy, and smells warm. You eat anyway. Afterward, your stomach protests but settles. You sip weak ale and listen. A man nearby swears he saw the Lord's steward eat a poisoned fish. Died foaming at the mouth, they say. Another tells of a traveling monk who bought saffron pie and dreamed of devils for days. Everyone nods. Food is a gamble. Always has been. As the light fades, you make your way back. The kitchen is quieter now. Someone's prepping dough, coarse flour water, a pinch of salt. Maybe yeast if there's any left. Otherwise, it's flat and dense. Bread bakes over coals, not in a grand oven. You watch it puff slightly, the scent comforting despite the char. You take a small round loaf when it's done. It's chewy, smoky, and leaves grit on your tongue. You tear it in half and share it with the neighbor's boy who eats like it's a miracle. Maybe it is. Tomorrow, the hunt for food begins again. And it always begins with uncertainty. What's in the pot? What's in the bread? Is the milk safe? Is the fish fresh? You eat. You pray, and you hope the answer is yes. You wake up to the sound of hooves squelching in mud and a dog barking in the distance. Someone's already stirring the hearth fire, coaxing smoke and flame from the embers. The air is dense with last night's ashes and the faintly acrid tang of boiled onions. You sit up slowly, your joints stiff from the cold, and reach for the same meal that greeted yesterday's sunrise, leftover mush, stale bread, and beer with more foam than flavor. The bread is harder than before, and when you tear off a piece, something black flits across the surface. A beetle, maybe. You flick it away without much thought. You've learned to stop being surprised. If the bread isn't moldy, buggy, or crusted with ash, it's a good day. And today is fine. Just fine. You chew slowly, thinking about what people call trencher bread, those thick slabs used more as plates than food. At noble tables, food is piled onto these slabs, which soak up meat juices, sauces, and oils. They're passed down to the poor afterward, a kind of greasy charity. By then they're cold, limp, and slippery, but to someone starving, they're better than gold. A trencher soaked in goose fat is practically a feast. Still, you dream of something simpler, a pear, a fresh plum. But fruit is seasonal, and seasons are cruel. You remember how apples are sliced and dried by the fire strung on twine like garlands. A little tough, a little tart, but they last. And in winter, they're as precious as spices. Speaking of spices, they hold a strange power in your world. Not just flavor, but symbolism. Pepper, cloves, cinnamon, saffron. These are the treasures of trade hauled by caravan, by ship, across empires. Most people never see them. They're for the rich, the powerful, the clergy. Yet every now and then, a pinch appears in a dish and transforms it entirely. You recall the noble's feast you glimpsed once through a cracked wooden screen, boiled capon glazed in saffron, a pie bursting with eggs and currants, a broth dusted with nutmeg. The colors were surreal. bright yellows and reds from roots, spices, and pigments. The food wasn't just sustenance, it was art, pageantry, performance. And all of it masked something: age, odor, decay. They seasoned to cover the rot, not to celebrate the taste. Your own meals are plainer: oats simmered with water. Maybe milk if the cow cooperates. Sometimes turnips or nettles are tossed in. On really good days, you find marrow bones. You split them, roast them, scoop out the soft, savory center with a crust of bread. It's greasy, rich, and faintly sweet. It coats your tongue and lingers in your memory. The marrow doesn't last long, but the sensation does. You see other tricks too, how households use sour ale to tenderize meat, or how vinegar becomes both preservative and marinade. Fish pickled in brine can last months. You've learned to appreciate the sour, the fermented, the sharp. Your palate has adapted, and slowly you stop thinking of these flavors as masks. They're survival. Still, not everything can be saved. You remember the story of the baker's apprentice who used spoiled rye flour. The bread came out fine, so he thought. He sold it. People began hallucinating that night, shaking, screaming, clawing at their own skin. Some claimed the devil had arrived. Others just shivered into stillness. Ergo, again. The fungus thrives in wet summers and lives in the grain. Invisible, silent, deadly. The boy was never seen again. Maybe he fled. Maybe he was dragged away. It makes you think more carefully as you grind grain by hand, coarse, uneven, gritty. You inspect the kernels, sniff them, pick out anything suspicious. But ergo doesn't smell. It doesn't taste. It simply waits. You sigh and stretch your legs. The day has grown brighter, but not much warmer. You head out to the smokehouse. Meat hangs from the rafters, darkened by time and soot. Some pieces are more bone than flesh, but you still nibble where you can. The scent is strong wood meat and something slightly musty. You cut off a strip, chew slowly. It's dry and tough, but it fills your belly. The village is busy today. Someone's boiling wort for beer, the scent of hops bitter and oddly comforting. Others are baking flatbread over hot stones, each one scorched in spots, smoky and chewy. You accept one, tear it in half, and eat as you walk. A woman offers you broth from a large pot. It's thin, mostly water with some wilted cabbage and a hint of fat. You sip carefully. It tastes better than it looks. Maybe it's the warmth. Maybe it's the salt. Maybe it's just the fact that someone else made it. You pass a group of children gnawing on strips of dried fruit. Apples and pears, tough as leather but sweet. They chew with patience, laughing between bites. It reminds you of the small joys food can bring even here, even now. Later, someone brings in a fish from the river, plump and slick. The catch is rare enough to draw attention. It's gutted on the spot, and you watch the butcher carefully. If the gallbladder bursts, the whole fish is ruined. He's skilled, though, and slices clean. The fish is rubbed with salt, stuffed with herbs, and laid near the coals. When it's done, the skin peels back like parchment, revealing steaming, flaky flesh. You get a piece. It tastes honest, clean, a miracle. You sit by the fire as night falls, belly warm and full for once. Someone breaks out a jug of honeyed wine. You sip it slowly, savoring the sweetness. It stings slightly on the tongue, fermented just enough to tingle. You close your eyes and imagine summer. The wind picks up, rattling the shutters. In the corner, someone begins kneading dough for tomorrow's bread. The flour is coarse, the water cloudy, the salt uncertain. but the rhythm is familiar, almost soothing. You realize that the meals here aren't just about what's available. They're about what can be endured, what can be transformed. You eat to survive, yes, but also to remember to share, to feel something beyond the cold. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because in the medieval world, hunger is patient, but so are you. The rooster again. That same broken cry echoing through the thatch, a shrill reminder that morning doesn't wait for anyone. You sit up slowly, stiff and aching, not from age but from cold, and sleeping on straw stuffed into a sack. Breakfast, if it exists, is whatever you can scrape together. You reach for the hard little loaf you stashed last night, its edges now crusted and nearly stone. You knock it against the table again. Still wins. You break off a piece and hold it over the fire, hoping the warmth might soften it just a little. It doesn't. But you chew anyway, slow and deliberate, letting your teeth do the work your hands can't. It's like chewing bark, but your stomach will thank you for anything solid. Someone's stirring a pot nearby. A new pottage or just yesterday's reanimated by fire and a splash of beer. You're not sure. It smells vaguely of root vegetables, onions, and something more earthy. Perhaps a hint of dried meat, or maybe just a particularly ripe turnip. Still, you accept a bowl gratefully. The warmth alone is worth it. It's market day. You wrap yourself in your cloak, scratchy worn, but it still holds some heat, and head down the muddy lane. The market is already humming muddy boots, stamping hens, clucking in baskets, fish laid out on planks, and already buzzing with flies. You're here more to observe than to buy. Coins are scarce, and bartering is its own complex language. The fishmonger is slicing into a large pike, its belly distended and suspiciously soft. You watch as he sniffs, it shrugs, and slathers it in salt and crushed mustard seed. That's the trick. When freshness is rare, spice becomes illusion. You don't hide the rot, you redefine it. Across the square, a baker hawks loaves of varying density. Some are pale and soft, likely wheat flour, and meant for wealthier hands. Others are heavy grayish, the result of rye and barley, your kind of bread. The smell is still good, at least hot crust, and a faint char from the fire pit stones. You trade a few eggs for a small round, and tuck it into your satchel like treasure. You pass by a cellar with a pot of something steaming. Peas pudding, she says. You know this dish, boiled peas beaten until soft, thickened into something spreadable. Sometimes spiced with pepper or mint if you're lucky. Today it's plain but warm. You accept a spoonful. It's chalky, earthy, bland, but somehow comforting. It sticks to your ribs. As you wander, you think again about how the rich eat, how food is layered not just with flavor, but performance. A pie might contain a surprise live birds fluttering out. When it's opened, a display of spectacle and absurdity. Sugar molded into swans or castles glazed in gold leaf. It's beautiful, sure, but inedible for most. A show. And beneath it all, the same dangers. Meat gone off sauces over-seasoned to conceal decay. No amount of wealth protects you from poor preservation. You remember hearing about the great fish deception. That's what some call it when a cook tries to pass off a less expensive fish burbot, or tench as sturgeon, or pike by dousing it in strong sauces, reshaping the fillets, even dyeing the flesh. People eat with their eyes. And if you can make it look noble, it becomes noble. Until someone falls ill. Then it's the cook's fault, or the stars, or the devil. You pass a spice cellar, exotic, mysterious, wrapped in wool and shadow. Tiny sacks of saffron grains of paradise, dried ginger, long pepper. The prices are absurd. You could buy a sheep for a pinch of cloves, but for some it's worth it. Spices signal status, refinement, even piety. A well-spiced dish shows you care for your soul, and perhaps your guests' stomachs, though that's debatable. As the sun peaks and begins its slow descent, you return home. You tuck your bread away, stir the pot again. You've scavenged some leeks and cabbage, maybe a knob of old cheese. It's enough for a meal. Barely. You reflect on how much energy goes into simply eating. Planting, harvesting, preserving. The endless grind of meal and flour. The vigilance against mold, spoilage, thievery. There's no such thing as convenience here. Food is work. Every bite is earned. You remember how the Lord's feast, yes, but you also recall the monks. Their food is spare by design: beans, onions, barley bread. Simple, ascetic, yet often safer, more consistent. Monasteries keep careful kitchens, clean tools, recorded recipes. For some, becoming a monk isn't just about faith, it's about stability. Regular meals, clean water, fewer parasites. And speaking of water, you haven't touched the well today. You'll need some soon, but always with caution. Surface water carries danger, parasites, human waste, decomposing animals. You recall stories of entire villages falling ill after one bad draw. So you ladle carefully, or boil it first if there's wood to spare. By nightfall, your supper is a thick porridge flavored with the cheese rind and wilted greens. You eat it slowly, spoon scraping the sides of your bowl. The fire crackles. It's not satisfying in the modern sense. There's no umami, no mouthfeel. But it quiets the hollow ache in your belly. Someone offers you a candied root parsnip, or angelica boiled in honey and dried. It's strange and fibrous, but sweet. Your mouth fills with warmth and a sticky pleasure you hadn't realized you missed. Sweetness is rare here. You savor every grain. As the stars rise, you lie back against the rough straw and listen to the creaks of the house. The wind moans softly through the shutters. Somewhere nearby, someone is still awake, scraping a pan or turning bread near the coals. You close your eyes. In this world, food isn't pleasure. It's persistence. A daily negotiation between scarcity, creativity, and hope. You make peace with it. You have to. Because tomorrow, the hunger will wake up before you do. The wind is sharp this morning, curling under door frames and slipping between the cracks in the walls. You pull your cloak tighter, tugging the coarse wool up to your chin as your breath mists faintly in the cold air. The fire's gone out again, and you fumble with flint and steel, coaxing life from a few stubborn embers. When it finally catches, it's like a blessing. You hover close, letting your fingers thaw, while a pot of water slowly begins to warm above the flames. Breakfast is the last of the barley mush, now cold and lumpy, scooped out in dull gray chunks. You stir it with a little beer to loosen it, then heat it until it bubbles with a low, sleepy sigh. The smell is faintly sour. You ignore it. Sour is normal. You spoon it into your mouth, slowly blowing on each bite, letting it settle into your stomach like a stone dropped into a still pond. There's talk of a slaughter today. One of the pigs is to be butchered, finally fat enough. The idea sends a ripple of anticipation through the household. Meat days are rare, and though the pig will be salted and preserved for winter, there will be fresh meat tonight. You make a silent note of gratitude to the animal, then quickly move on. In this world, sentiment doesn't fill bellies. When the pig is killed, the whole village gets involved. The process is efficient, brutal, and precise. The blood is caught in a bowl, stirred with vinegar or salt to keep it from congealing too fast. It'll be used in blood pudding or sausages later. Nothing is wasted. The head will be boiled down for brawn, a soft, gelatinous meat jelly. The organs eaten quickly. The fat rendered for lard. Even the bladder might become a child's toy. You've learned not to flinch. You've seen it all before. By midday, the kitchen is a flurry of movement. There's smoke and shouting and the rhythmic thud of a cleaver on wood. You're handed a task, shredding cabbage or maybe peeling roots. It's hard to tell under the grime. Your fingers are cold and clumsy, but you work. Everyone does. This is a feast, and feasts don't make themselves. The stew begins with onions, then the tougher cuts of meat simmered low and slow. In go leeks garlic turnips. The smell gradually transforms from raw earth to something deeper, meaty, sweet, complex. You catch whiffs of pepper and bay leaf, maybe even parsley, if someone remembered to pick some. It's the kind of meal that silences people when it's served. You don't eat yet, though. The meat has to cook long enough to soften, to loosen from the bone. You sit and wait, stomach gnawing on itself while the scent drives you mad. As you wait, you talk. Food always inspires stories. One woman recounts how her cousin died from a bad pie-spoiled pigeon, they think. Another man talks about a neighbor who grew fat, eating nothing but fried bread and ale until he collapsed in the field. One day his belly bloated and purple. No one knows what killed him. Some say gluttony. Others say witchcraft. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. The stew is finally ladled into bowls, wooden, uneven, stained from years of use. You dip in a crust of bread softened now by the broth. The meat is tender, though some pieces are stringy, and there's a bit of gristle you have to chew carefully. Still, it's glorious, rich and warming, the kind of meal that makes the cold recede. You eat slowly, trying to stretch the moment. Afterward, the bones are saved, some for broth, others for dogs. Nothing is discarded. Even the ashes from the fire will be sifted, saved for soap making, or to scatter on icy paths. Someone brings out ale stronger than usual. You sip it and feel it go straight to your cheeks. For a brief hour or two, the world seems softer. The cold less sharp, the dark less threatening. You notice, too, how celebrations echo in the food. It's not just about flavor, but about ritual. Special days mean special dishes. On All Souls' Day, there are soul cakes, small spiced, sometimes sweet, left out for the dead or given to the poor. At Easter, eggs dyed with onion skins or beet juice. Christmas might bring a goose if luck's with you, or even a pudding packed with suet dried fruit and strong drink. They don't always taste good, but they taste different. And that's enough. You think about hunger, not the sharp pang of skipping a meal, but the slow erosion of going days without. You've seen what that looks like. Eyes sunken ribs like ladders. People who gnaw bark, eat grass, or chew leather. Who drink broth made from boiled weeds. You've tasted desperation. It's bitter and green and clings to the back of your throat. But tonight, you're full. That rare fullness that makes your limbs heavy and your mind hazy. You lie back near the fire, stomach gently aching, and watch shadows flicker on the ceiling. Someone is still humming a low lullaby of no particular melody. A child yawns. A dog snorts in its sleep. You think briefly about tomorrow. What will be left? What will be salted, boiled, or buried in fat? You think about how quickly meat turns if it's not dealt with. Even now, there are flies in the corners waiting for you to make a mistake. But tonight, you don't worry. Tonight you sleep with food in your belly, warmth on your skin, and the faint scent of stew clinging to your clothes. For now, that's enough. And in this world, enough is everything. The morning air smells different today, meat and smoke lingering fat in the rafters. The memory of last night's feast still heavy in the house. It clings to everything, your tunic, your hair, even your skin feels oily, as though the broth seeped in through your pores while you slept. You sit up slowly, your belly less empty than usual, but already twitching with expectation. There are leftovers, maybe. You can still taste the stew if you close your eyes. The fire is low again, but there's still heat in the stones. You stoke it gently, then check the pot. Inside the remaining meat has congealed into a soft jelly, the fat solidified in a pale, waxy layer on top. You crack through it with the back of a spoon and stir the contents slowly. The aroma rises less rich than yesterday, but still full of promise. You add a splash of water, a pinch of salt, and set it back to the fire. Breakfast today is a repeat, but a luxurious one by your standards. Even second-day stew feels like a holiday. You savor each bite, taking care not to rush. You don't know when you'll eat like this again. The rest of the household stirs slowly. The children are quiet, drowsy, with full bellies for once. The elders murmur half prayers, half conversations. Someone sharpens a blade. Someone else starts washing cloths stained from yesterday's butchering. The tools are wiped down with ashes and vinegar. A bucket of pig blood is set outside to cool, congealing slowly under the morning sun. You step outside and breathe deeply. The sky is clear, but the air is sharp, the kind that dries your lips and stings your eyes. You head toward the smokehouse, hoping to help with the curing. The fresh cuts of pork are already hanging from the beams, thick slabs rubbed with salt, tied with coarse rope. A man is tending the fire below, feeding it with damp branches so the smoke stays low and dense. The scent is thick, almost sweet, clinging to your throat. You help rub down a few sides of meat. The salt stings your hands, tiny cuts you didn't know you had come alive. But the work is steady, calming in its repetition. The fat is cool and slippery, the muscle firm under your fingers. You press in, pack the salt, and hang each piece with care. This is next month's food, maybe next season's, if you're careful. Nearby, someone is stuffing intestines with blood and barley. The sausage casings glisten almost pearlescent in the light. You've eaten them before, crisped over a fire, hissing and sputtering until the skins split. They're rich, heavy, and faintly metallic. Not your favorite, but when food is scarce, you don't play favorites. You eat what's warm, what's safe. You glance toward the garden, what remains of it. Winter is coming quickly now. The ground is hardening, and most of the vegetables have been pulled. Leeks still stand bravely, their green shoots a final flare of color in a field of brown. You kneel and harvest what's left: onions with skins like parchment garlic bulbs, thin but fragrant. These will go in the root cellar, wrapped in cloth, tucked into crates filled with straw. You'll be rationing them for months. Back inside, the house is bustling again. Someone's boiling bones for stock. The pot gurgles with foam and marrow, the surface scummed with froth that skimmed away with a flat spoon. You're told not to waste it. It'll go into the dog's bowl or into a secondary gruel. Every calorie matters. You think about famine not as a concept, but as a memory. The older folk speak of the Great Famine, the years when the rains came too long, when the crops drowned, when mold took the grain, and animals starved in the fields. They say people ate bark-boiled leather, even buried their dead with empty stomachs. Some don't speak of it at all. Just stare into the fire with eyes too old for their faces. You've seen bad years, but nothing like that. Still, you know the signs: mushrooms growing in sacks of grain, the faint pink dust of mold clinging to flour, the soft collapse of an onion in your hand. These are warnings. You learn to listen. Later, you help with the bread. Today's is made with chestnut flour, coarse brown, a little sweet, mixed with water and salt, and not much else. There's no yeast, so it's dense flat and scorched on the bottom where it meets the hot stone. Still, when you tear off a piece, it steams in your hands. You eat slowly, letting the earthy sweetness sit on your tongue. A neighbor arrives with a jug of milk. It's thick and slightly sour. You pour it into a pot and warm it gently, watching as the curds begin to form. Someone adds vinegar, stirs it with a stick, then strains it through cloth. The result is soft cheese, mild, a little grainy but nourishing. It won't last long. You eat some now, sprinkle it with salt, and set the rest aside for tomorrow. That night the mood is quieter. The fire burns lower. You nibble on bread and cheese, sip weak ale, and listen to the fire crackle. No one speaks much. Everyone's thinking of winter now. What's stored? What's left? What might run out? You wrap yourself tightly and stare at the ceiling beams. You can still smell the smoke on your skin, still feel the salt in your knuckles. It's in your clothes, your hair, your breath. Food doesn't leave you here. It follows you, marks you, becomes you. Your stomach isn't empty tonight. That's rare. You let the warmth settle in your limbs, knowing full well it may not last. Tomorrow is always uncertain. But tonight, you've eaten. And in the medieval world, that's more than enough. You wake before the sun rises, stirred not by noise or light, but by instinct. Hunger again, though it's quieter today, a dull ache rather than a sharp cry. Your body's learned to expect less, to wait to stretch each bite across hours. You move slowly, limbs reluctant in the cold. The fire has long since burned low, and the hearth is gray with ash. You gather twigs and breathe life into a spark. It catches, hesitates, then blooms. The orange light flickers across the room, revealing a pot you left soaking the night before. Inside is a handful of lentils, some onion skin, and the tail end of yesterday's broth. You top it with water and stir, hoping the flavor will return with heat. This is what most mornings are: reassembly. A recovery of scraps, a reckoning with what remains. Nothing is ever truly finished. Meals are long arcs looping across days. A stew becomes a broth, becomes a gruel, becomes a memory. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever truly gone. While you wait for the pot to simmer, you bite into a heel of bread. It's dry, flinty, more effort than pleasure. You suck on it, letting the saliva soften the crust. A trick you've learned. Your jaw aches slightly, but it's something. As the lentils begin to bubble, you think about how food shapes your calendar. The church's fast days still dominate the rhythm of the week. Fridays mean no meat. So do the long weeks of Lent, Advent, and assorted vigils. But the church makes exceptions for fish, and so a quiet industry blooms in the cracks of religion, the fish trade. You've seen the barrels arrive from the coast, salted cod herring, dried eels coiled like ropes. The fish is hard, unyielding, smelling faintly of brine and old socks. You must soak it for hours, beat it with a mallet, boil it until it flakes. Then perhaps it's edible. You remember a dish served on a particularly cold Friday herring pie with raisins and vinegar. Sweet, salty, sour, and slick with fish oil. An odd combination, but one that's grown on you. There's a strange harmony to it. Food here isn't neat. It collides, and you learn to find pleasure in the crash. By mid-morning, the village is stirring. You head down toward the commons where a few others are tending to chores. Someone is making ale, the smell of yeast and wet grain rising in waves. You're handed a mug of the fresh brew, cloudy, slightly sour, barely alcoholic. It's enough to take the chill out of your bones. A child nearby chews on a strip of dried apple. You envy the simplicity of it, the sweetness, the fact that something once juicy and fresh can survive in leathery form through the lean months. You think of preservation as a kind of sorcery, turning soft into firm perishable, into lasting. Today, someone is baking. You can smell it before you see it, coarse bread made from rye and pea flour, dotted with what might be dried onion or crushed legumes. You help knead the dough, pressing the sticky mass into flat rounds and sliding them onto hot stones. The crust scorches slightly, the smoke curling up into your sleeves and eyes. You eat one as soon as it cools, tearing into the chewy center. It's better than most earthy, salty, with a faint echo of sweetness from the onions. You tuck another into your cloak for later. A hidden treasure. Someone has brought a gift, spiced wafers from the manor. Not for you, but for the reeve who shares a scrap in good humor. It's thin, sweet, brittle. You taste honey ginger, perhaps even clove. A flash of wealth in a world of scarcity. It dissolves on your tongue like snow, and then it's gone. You lick the sugar from your fingers. You think of spices again, how they travel farther than most people ever will. Cinnamon from Ceylon, nutmeg from the Banda Islands, cardamom, galangal, turmeric, all packed in chests passed hand to hand through markets and ports until they land on a table here. By the time they reach your village, they've passed through a dozen hands and doubled in price each time. You don't use them to flavor food. Not really. You use them to preserve dignity, to mask decay, to signal status. And when they're gone, you go back to salt. Reliable, eternal salt. Lunch, if you can call it that, is porridge. Again. This time made with millet and broth, flavored with leek and a rind of old cheese. It's gluey, clumpy, but warm. You eat slowly, watching the steam curl upward in lazy spirals. You hear tales around the fire of deadly mushrooms mistaken for safe ones. A man once picked death caps thinking they were meadow mushrooms. His wife cooked them in butter, served them on toast. He died in 3 days, she in 4. Their son, who'd had only one bite, lost his eyesight. Now he begs by the church door. You learn to trust only the foragers who've lived long enough to teach others. Later, you help dig in the garden, turning the last of the soil before it hardens. There are still carrots hidden beneath frostbitten, but edible. You bite into one, it snaps, releasing cold sweetness. Not much, but enough to remind you that the earth still offers things. Dinner is thin cabbage soup with barley and a splash of ale. You eat it with the last of your morning bread, softened now by time and moisture. Tastes better than it did before. Or maybe you've just grown hungrier. Afterward, someone passes around dried plums, prunes leathery and dark. You suck on one, letting the sweetness coat your tongue. It's not sugar, but it's close. You settle into your straw palate, the scent of onions and wood smoke still in your hair. Your stomach isn't full, but it's no longer hollow. The fire burns low and the room is hushed. Food here is never guaranteed. It's a dance of labor, luck, and timing. But tonight, you've eaten 3 times. That counts for something. And in the medieval world, That's a quiet kind of triumph. The wind moans low through the trees outside, bending the branches with a weary sigh that sounds almost human. You open your eyes to gray light and the familiar scent of ashes and damp wool. A single ember glows faintly in the hearth. You crawl toward it, feeding it dried straw, coaxing it with shallow breaths until it blooms. The warmth touches your fingers like a promise. There's a pot beside the fire, cold now, but not empty. You lift the lid and find the remnants of yesterday's cabbage and barley soup. The fat has risen and set in thin, milky patches. You add a little water, swirl it gently, and return it to the flames. Breakfast again is a resurrection. The soup warms slowly, and the smell returns briny, vegetal, faintly sour. You ladle a bowl and eat in silence, listening to the wind outside and the occasional creak of the rafters. A chunk of bread follows, softened in the broth, until it sags on your spoon. You chew it slowly, grateful that it doesn't bite back. No mold, no crunch of grit, just bread. Or what passes for it here. Outside, the frost clings to the earth like a second skin. The ground crunches under your boots as you head to the well. You lower the bucket, careful not to let it splash too hard. The water comes up icy, clean enough today. You take a sip and brace for the chill, then carry the rest back to the house with stiff fingers and careful steps. Someone's gutting a rabbit in the yard. A small one barely worth the effort, but still a blessing. Its eyes are dull, its fur slick with dew. The woman works quickly, skinning it in long practiced motions. The meat is lean, almost sinew. There's barely enough for stew, but it will stretch if paired with barley onion and a few bitter greens. You think about meat again, how rare it is, how it alters the mood of a whole house. Even a bit of fat or marrow makes a dish richer, more nourishing. But the dangers never leave. Bad meat doesn't always look bad. If it's just slightly turned, the smell can be masked with garlic or vinegar. But spoilage is subtle, and once it's inside you, it's already too late. There's a story of a merchant who sold goose stuffed with apples and cloves. By the time the guests were vomiting, he'd vanished. Some say he knew. Others say the apples were too soft or the goose too long dead. Either way, 3 people died, and the Lord's Son hasn't spoken since. He just sits now, rocking gently, muttering prayers to the Virgin. You know enough to be cautious. You sniff every piece of meat, check for the faint shimmer of slime, the too sweet smell of decay. But sometimes hunger overrides caution. Sometimes the risk is worth it. Back inside, the rabbit has been jointed and is already bubbling in a pot with herbs and a splash of sour ale. The smell is warm and wild. You add some leftover porridge to thicken the broth. It's not elegant, but it binds. The flavors makes it hearty. The afternoon passes in quiet labor. You help with drying herbs, hanging bunches of thyme, sage, and hyssop from beams above the hearth. These are your medicines and your spices. A handful of thyme in a broth can chase off the chill. Sage helps the belly. Hyssop, they say, keeps away the plague. You think of plague more often now. It doesn't touch food directly, but it's always nearby. The baker's wife is coughing again, a dry barking sound. She claims it's the smoke, but everyone watches her now with narrowed eyes. Bread still arrives daily, but fewer hands reach for it. You inspect your own stores later. A wheel of cheese, hard and dry, but not yet moldy. A bag of dried peas. Some smoked fish, curled and dark, hanging from a hook. A pot of lard, thick and pale, sealed with cloth and string. Not much, but enough. if you're careful. That evening, you're lucky. The rabbit stew is shared among the house. Small portions, but rich. The meat is soft, the broth thick, the flavor deep with herbs and roots. You eat slowly, licking the back of your spoon between bites. It's the best meal you've had in weeks. Afterwards, someone passes around a few boiled eggs, rare, fragile treasures. You crack one open. The yolk is firm, pale yellow, no sulfurous scent. Fresh enough. You sprinkle it with salt and eat it in 2 bites. Simple. Perfect. For dessert, though no one calls it that, someone brings out a bit of honeycomb. Raw, golden fragrant. You're handed a sliver. It sticks to your fingers, melts on your tongue, and fills your mouth with warmth. It reminds you of summer, of flowers, of bees humming lazily in the sun. You let the sweetness linger. The fire burns lower as the night deepens. You wrap yourself in a woolen blanket stiff with smoke and lie back on your straw pallet. The scent of stew still clings to the air. The rabbit bones are buried now, the pot scrubbed. Tomorrow there will be nothing left but the memory. And still that memory will sustain you. Because in this world, food is not just fuel, it's experience, risk, ritual. Each bite is a gamble, a prayer, a comfort. You drift to sleep with the taste of honey still on your lips and the quiet ache of satisfaction in your belly. Tonight you've eaten well, and that means for once you dream easy. Your dreams were quiet, which is always a good sign. No sweating, no cramping, no waking in the dark with your gut twisted in knots. The stew must have been good after all. Safe. You stretch your limbs slowly, testing for aches, for stiffness, for the telltale signs of bad food lurking in your blood. But there's only the usual cold fingers, a back that's slept too long on straw, and the gentle throb of a hunger just beginning to stir. The fire is low, but still alive. You feed it carefully, coaxing warmth into the chill. The coals glow brighter, and soon the room is flickering with familiar orange light. It's strange how comforting that color becomes so close to the hues of cooked food, of warmth, of safety. You check the pot. It's empty. Already scraped clean by someone earlier, perhaps a child too hungry to wait. That's all right. You weren't expecting leftovers. Not today. Instead, you gather what little remains in the pantry, a handful of peas, a few scraps of onion, and the heel of yesterday's bread now going rigid. You slice the bread into thin slivers and toast them on a flat stone. They don't soften. You eat them anyway. They crunch like bark, but there's a nutty warmth there, and a kind of quiet dignity in starting the day with something hot, however small. Later, you make your way to the neighboring cottage. The family there is preserving apples late harvest and beginning to go soft, but still usable. The air smells sharp and sweet, tinged with vinegar and spice. They slice the fruit, thin soak it in cider, then dry the pieces near the hearth, or thread them onto strings to hang above the smoke. You're given a few to help string sticky, pale crescents that bend under your fingers. It's tedious work, but you're glad for it. They offer you a taste of apple preserve boiled down with honey and crushed juniper. It's thick, dark, and syrupy. You dab a bit on your finger and taste. It's almost too sweet, like something forbidden. Your teeth ache just from the memory of it. These preserved fruits will last deep into winter. That's the goal food that endures. Not food that pleases or surprises or delights. Food that stays. Food that can wait. Afterward, you help turn the churn. Butter making is hard work, and your arms tire quickly. But the result is worth it: soft, white, slightly sour butter kept in a wooden tub sealed with cloth. Fresh butter is a rare thing. It doesn't last. In summer, it goes rancid quickly, especially when the air is thick with flies. But now in the colder months, it keeps for a little while. You take a spoonful and spread it on a crust of bread, what remains from breakfast. The combination is simple but satisfying. Fat and grain salt and heat. It fills a corner of your belly and makes you feel briefly content. That afternoon, you visit the manor to help in the kitchens. Not out of obligation, but in hopes of gleaning something: a crust of pastry, a spoon of gravy. The kitchen there is louder, more chaotic, filled with noise and heat and motion. Servants bark orders, knives clatter against boards, pots hiss over flames. They're preparing for a feast, someone's saint's day, or perhaps a visiting lord. It doesn't matter. What matters is the food. You watch as they prepare roasted fowl, geese, ducks, even a swan. The feathers are plucked with care, the bodies rubbed with garlic and herbs. Some will be roasted plainly. Others glazed in sugar and saffron, then redressed in their own feathers for presentation. It's grotesque and beautiful and entirely impractical. You're allowed to help with the pastry. Not the filling that's for the upper hands, but the crusts. Coarse flour, cold, lard water. Rolled out on boards, scrubbed thin with salt. These aren't meant to be eaten, really. They're containers vessels. The fillings, meat and fruit and spice, are the stars. The crust just keeps the rot away until it's time to serve. Still, you sneak a bite of the discarded edge. It's bland, dry, but heavy with the ghost of roasted meat. You chew carefully, pocket a second bit for later, and move on. Someone's boiling a pudding beef suet, oats, dried plums, and ale. It steams for hours in a cloth sack tied tight and suspended over a pot. The smell fills the room, rich, dark, sticky. You know from experience it'll be dense as stone but satisfying. The kind of food that anchors you in the world. Nearby, a servant is grinding mustard seeds with vinegar. The smell is sharp, almost painful in your nose. It'll be served with cold meats used to mask the flavor of whatever's just past its prime. The lords think it's refinement. The cooks know it's survival. Later, as the feast begins upstairs, you and the other helpers gather near the back hearth. You're handed scraps, chewed bones with shreds of meat, a torn heel of pie, a spoonful of pudding stuck to a ladle. You eat in silence, savoring the borrowed luxury. It's delicious, but it's not yours. It belongs to the upper tables, the guests with soft hands and finer cloaks. Still, your body doesn't know the difference. It's warm. It's rich. It's enough. Afterward, you walk home under a sky blooming with stars. The cold is sharper now, biting at your ears and nose. But your belly is full, an uncommon feeling, and one to be cherished. You think again about what food means in your world. Not pleasure, not convenience, not choice. It means preparation, patience, memory, risk. And tonight, as you drift to sleep with the scent of roasted duck still lingering in your hair, you're reminded that even in the leanest times, a scrap can be enough to make you feel human again. And sometimes, that's all you need. The sky is pewter gray when you rise thick with the promise of rain. It hasn't started yet, but the air smells of wet stone and coming storms. You wrap yourself tightly in your cloak, still heavy with last night's smoke, and move stiffly toward the fire. The embers are nearly gone. You huddle close, feeding them gently with straw and twigs, coaxing them back to life. Your breath rises in faint clouds. it's going to be a cold one. There's no pot waiting today, no stew to reheat, no crust of bread hidden under cloth. Hunger greets you more loudly than usual, less patient, more demanding. You rummage through the larder such as it is. A few dried peas, a bit of flour in the bottom of a sack, and some lard congealed in a small jar. Enough to make a paste, perhaps. A kind of crude cake. You knead the flour and lard with a little water, pressing it into patties and laying them flat on a stone warmed in the fire. They hiss faintly, smoking at the edges, then settle into silence. When they're done, you chew them slowly, greasy, heavy, nearly flavorless. But they stick to your ribs. That's all that matters. Outside, the rain begins in earnest. A slow, soaking drizzle that seeps into everything. You pull up your hood and trudge through the muck toward the village commons. Market day again, though fewer sellers have braved the weather. A woman stands beneath a tattered canvas selling turnips and wrinkled carrots. Another man has a stack of smoked fish, leathery and stiff. You trade a bit of firewood for a handful of onions and one small, dubious-looking trout. You carry it back carefully wrapped in cloth, nose twitching with every whiff of something slightly too sweet. Spoiled, maybe. But maybe not yet. You've eaten worse. Back home, you set to cleaning the fish. It's thin, bony, and its eyes have already begun to cloud. You gut it gently, wash it in well water, and lay it in a pan with the onions, a few leaves of sage, and a splash of ale. You cook it slowly, lid on, letting the steam coax out what flavor remains. While it simmers, you think of salt. How rare it still is, even now. Salted food is safer, longer lasting, less likely to kill you. But the salt itself is precious. Mined, hauled, traded, hoarded. Whole economies move on it. A salted herring can travel for weeks and still feed you. A salted ham sliced thin can stretch across a season. But salt doesn't prevent every danger. You've heard of salted meat gone bad anyway, especially when mixed with poor air or mold creeping in through the cracks. The salt draws out moisture, yes, but not time. Time always wins, and decay waits for no one. You eat the fish with a crust of old bread. The flesh is soft, almost mushy. The flavor sweet, sour, salty, strange. But you keep chewing. You know the rules now. If it doesn't smell exactly like death, it's probably still life. Afterward, you tend the fire again and dry your cloak near the hearth. You listen to the rain hit the roof in steady rhythm, a song older than language. The day stretches out long and quiet. You spend it preparing what little you have for the days ahead, peeling roots, drying herbs, boiling broth from bones too cracked to hold marrow. Every scrap becomes something. You think about bread again. Not the soft kind you remember from childhood stories, no yeasty loaves or golden crusts. Bread here is dense, dark, hard enough to dull a knife. It crumbles into meals, acts as a spoon, a plate, a gift. It fills you in a way nothing else does, and yet it also kills. You've seen it happen, ergot again. The villagers know it by different names. Some say the fire in the blood. Others, the dancing sickness. Legs that won't stop twitching. Hands that claw the air. Visions of saints or demons or flames. You remember one poor girl who stripped off her clothes and walked into the woods, muttering that the trees were calling her. They found her 3 days later, frozen, still smiling. It all starts with the bread. That's why when flour is scarce, you're careful. You mix in legumes, seeds, chestnut flour, anything to stretch it, to dilute the danger. You bake in small batches. You inspect every sack of grain for purple kernels, for sour smells, for hints of menace. But the fungus is clever. It hides in plain sight. Dinner is simpler. A bit of pottage made from the leftover fish bones boiled with onion skins and carrot tops. It's thin, but it's hot. You sip it slowly, holding the bowl close to your face, letting the steam soften the tightness in your chest. Someone offers a bit of ale, a sour, flat brew, cloudy and pale. You drink anyway. It settles the stomach, warms the belly, and more importantly, it's safer than the water. You lie down early tonight, worn thin by the damp, the cold, the quiet strain of constant foraging. Your fingers smell of fish and ash. Your breath faintly of onion. Your stomach not full, but no longer screaming. As you pull the blanket around your shoulders, you think again of how food shapes the day. Not in choice, but in ritual, in rhythm. You rise, you search, you cook, you chew. And between those motions you survive. That's all the medieval table ever asks of you, not that you enjoy or indulge or explore, just that you make it to tomorrow. A light frost rims the edges of the window shutters this morning, painting delicate pale white fingers across the wood. You reach out and touch it. It melts instantly beneath your fingertip. Cold air snakes into the room with every breath of wind, so you stay close to the hearth, wrapping yourself in wool that smells faintly of damp and smoke. There's no fire yet, just a cold stone, so you kneel and begin again. Flint, steel, patience. A small spark, a curl of smoke, and finally the kiss of flame. You don't expect a proper breakfast. You've learned not to. The routine now is more about seeking than feasting. You move slowly to the corner where dried legumes are kept in a sack, now sagging near empty. A scoop of broad beans, some barley, a dried bay leaf stuck to the side. It's enough to make something warm. You cook it with water, of course, thin, cloudy, slightly gritty water from the well. You've boiled it beforehand, just in case. The mixture simmers gently, and the smell is humble, earthy, and plain like damp cloth and rain-soaked soil. You crush a little mustard seed between your fingers and toss it in for warmth. No salt today. You're saving the last pinch. You ladle the mush into a small wooden bowl and carry it outside. The sun hasn't quite risen yet, but the gray of morning is beginning to gather shape. The earth is stiff with frost. You sit on a worn bench, eating slowly, chewing thoughtfully, watching your breath curl upward like steam. Others are awake now, farmers mostly. You watch one walking down the lane with a bundle of dried turnip tops, another carrying a battered basket of eggs to barter. You nod in passing. No one speaks much in the morning. Everyone's hungry. You help muck out the pens, the scent of animals sharp in the cold. A pig snorts at you through the slats, curious, hopeful. You wonder if it senses how close it is to becoming stew. You pet its head gently, then move on. At midday, you're sent to collect mushrooms, though only the ones you know. Fungi are both gift and gamble. You know the safe ones by smell and color, and the way they break when you twist them. Still, you hesitate before picking anything you're not sure about. The wrong one won't just upset your stomach. It'll stop your heart. You return with a small sack of field mushrooms, pale rubbery, with delicate undersides. You clean them with care, slicing away the bottoms, inspecting for worms. Then into the pot, they go with the rest of your morning porridge. It's a different dish now, thicker, richer, with an almost meaty flavor. You feel lucky. Someone shares a slice of onion tart, later barely more than mashed onion and egg baked in a tough crust. It's pungent, slightly sweet, and unbelievably good. You close your eyes after the first bite, letting the warmth spread down your arms like sunlight. You try to guess the ingredients, maybe a pinch of nutmeg. Definitely a lot of time and love. Later, you help hang cured meat in the smokehouse sausages mostly, and some thin strips of beef, hard as bark. The smoke stings. Your eyes fills your mouth with the taste of embers. You wonder what it must have been like before anyone thought to use smoke as a shield, before people learned to tame rot with time and fire. You touch one of the hanging sausages, firm, dry, safe. You've grown to love that texture. It means you'll live. You think of what luxury is now. Not sweetness, not spice, not even fat, but certainty. A piece of food that won't harm you. Bread without fungus, water without worms, meat that won't fight back from your stomach in the night. By evening, you're bone-tired. The day has passed in labor and small satisfactions. Someone's roasted parsnips, long and caramelized, blackened at the edges. They're shared in pieces dipped in oil that tastes faintly rancid but still usable. You chew slowly, letting the natural sweetness balance out the bitterness of the oil. You sip weak ale afterward, warming your hands around the mug. Someone offers dried cherries, just a few chewy and tart. You suck on them like medicine. They feel like color in a world of gray. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a pan of water. Hollow cheeks, soot-smudged forehead. But your eyes still have light, and that's something. You sleep that night with a piece of coarse bread tucked in cloth saved for the next day. Not because you're full, but because you're finally learning to think ahead, to stretch moments across days, to turn scarcity into strategy. And as you lie in the dark, listening to the faint crackle of the fire, you feel the rhythm of your world more clearly than ever. Eat when you can share, when you must preserve what's precious and never waste a single bite. Because in this life, every mouthful is a quiet defiance against the hunger that never really sleeps. The next morning arrives with a sharp bite in the air and a brittle stillness that says snow is coming. You can feel it in your knees, your fingertips, the space behind your eyes. Even the animals move differently, slower, closer to the ground. You step outside your boots, stiff with yesterday's mud, now frozen in place, and you see your breath before you feel it. You don't expect much from the kitchen today. Supplies are thinning. The root cellar is nearly bare, and you've stretched the last sack of dried peas to its limits. Still, you open the door and peer into the dark, dank space beneath the floor. A few carrots bent and thin, some limp turnip greens, a single sprouting onion with long white tendrils curling like fingers. You gather them all and return to the fire. Breakfast is a pot of watery porridge yet again, but you're used to that. You've learned to eat it slowly, letting the heat sink in, letting your stomach fill with warmth rather than bulk. You shred the onion into it, using every part, even the sprout. It tastes stronger that way, sharper, more real. You grind a bit of dried pepper onto the top, saving the last pinch of spice for tomorrow. Always tomorrow. As the fire crackles back to life, you remember stories of snowstorms where people were trapped indoors for days. Meals reduced to licking marrow bones and boiling boot leather. You don't know if those stories are true, but you've seen enough winters to believe they could be. You've learned that hunger has layers. There's the hollow kind, and the sharp kind, and the kind that feels like fire in your belly. But the worst kind is the one that dulls everything when you're no longer hungry, just hollow. The midday meal is built from desperation. You soak a few slices of hard bread in hot beer, crush up dried herbs, and stir them into the mess. It's mush, but it's warm. You're joined by a neighbor who brings a little pot of boiled cabbage. Together, your dishes become a kind of soup. It's amazing what two poor kitchens can become when they join forces. Conversation turns to old food recipes from better times. A stew with beef and raisins. A pie of apples and cream. Roasted chestnuts with honey. You nod along, letting the words fill in the spaces your stomach cannot. Memory, too, can be a meal. Later, someone knocks a traveler, face wrapped in a scarf, eyes red from wind. He's selling dried fish, not cheap, but well cured. You trade an old wool scarf and a clay jug for two flat fillets of river fish, their flesh papery, their smell dry, but not foul. You soak one in water, while the other you save for tomorrow. The fish once boiled with carrots and a pinch of vinegar flakes beautifully. The taste is sharp, almost metallic, but clean. You eat with bread, dipping the crusts into the broth. The meal feels substantial, nourishing, the kind that stays with you a while. By evening, the clouds have thickened. Snow begins slow and silent, coating the village in a film of white. You wrap yourself tightly and sit near the fire, the fish bones drying on the hearth. You'll grind them later, add them to flour maybe. They say bone meal is good for the body if your teeth can handle it. Someone passes around a drink-hot ale, spiced with whatever could be found. It burns on the way down. You hold the cup close, warming your fingers, breathing in the bittersweet steam. It's the sort of warmth that makes you sleepy. A child sits nearby, gnawing on a strip of dried pear. You watch them chew with quiet contentment, eyes half closed. That fruit came from someone's careful summer labor, peeled, sliced, strung on twine, dried near a fire for weeks. Every bite now is a thread tying winter to summer, a bridge across seasons. You think about preservation differently these days, not just as a technique, but as a promise. Salting, drying, fermenting, sealing. These are the ways people fight back against time, against spoilage, against loss. Pickled vegetables in vinegar sealed in ceramic jars. Smoked meats buried in fat. Even eggs preserved in lime water. They taste odd, but they last. And that is everything. Tonight, your dinner is light but dignified. A few spoonfuls of carrot and fish broth. A thin slice of the saved bread toasted near the fire until its edges blacken. And a single pear slice shared with you by the child. It's leathery, sticky, and tastes like sunlight. You close your eyes and chew slowly. The fire is strong tonight. The snow muffles all other sounds. You lie back full in the way only a medieval winter can provide, not from abundance, but from balance. You've eaten enough. You've warmed your limbs. You've saved a little for tomorrow. And more than anything, you've kept hunger behind the door for another night. Not banished, just held at bay. And in this world, that's the highest kind of feast. Snow blankets the village by morning, thick and soft, muting every step, every creak, every whisper of the world. You step outside and feel it under your feet, crunchy, cold, clean in a way nothing else in your world ever truly is. The sky above is a flat, white ceiling, low and heavy, threatening more. The air smells of wood smoke and pine. You pull your cloak tighter and breathe deep. Back inside, your breath still clouds in the air. The fire takes longer to coax today. The wood is damp. It hisses and spits, but eventually catches, and soon the small room glows again. You add twigs, then logs, then set a pot of water to boil. You retrieve the second fillet of dried river fish from its cloth wrap. It feels cold and stiff like leather left too long in a cellar. You soak it gently, slowly. It needs time to soften. While it soaks, you prepare the rest of the morning meal, what there is of it. A heel of oat bread now speckled with flour and dried herbs from the cupboard. You scrape off a bit of green from the edges. Not much. Not deadly. Probably. You toast it over the flame until the char masks the rest. The fish is ready now, pliable, pale, fragrant. You add it to the pot with a few thin shavings of turnip and a pinch of dried dill. The scent that rises is surprisingly clean. You smile. Some meals are small victories. As it simmers, you think of the odd foods, the ones people whisper about, the ones that linger on the edge between cuisine and survival. Hedgehogs singed and cooked in clay. Roasted dormouse stuffed with nuts. Snails fattened on milk. You've heard of men boiling nettles into soup, scraping bark into flour, even roasting rats when the cupboards ran dry. You used to flinch at these stories. Now you understand them. Food here isn't always about what you're willing to eat. It's about what you're willing to try when there's nothing else. You remember hearing about gruel thinskin, a peasant's dish made of leftover grain water mixed with cabbage trimmings. It's eaten cold, drunk from a cup, or sopped up with crusts of bread too stale to chew. You've had it. It's gray, tasteless, but it fills you. The meal is ready now. The fish flakes into the broth like parchment. The turnip has softened. You ladle it carefully, mindful not to spill. It's hot, salty, and slightly bitter. You close your eyes and let it fill the hollows in your belly. You don't speak much during breakfast. Few do. Food is a quiet thing, almost sacred. You don't waste words when there's warmth in your hands. Later, you tend to the pantry again. The jars are lined up like a final defense against winter. Pickled onions, dried plums, apples shriveled in their skins. One pot of honeyed carrots sealed in wax. You touch each one, checking the lids, tapping the clay. Preserved food is trustworthy, but only just. One crack in the wax, one spoiled jar, and you lose more than taste. You lose security. In the afternoon, you help a neighbor skin a hare. It's lean, its flesh dark and bruised in places. Still, it's meat. You hold the legs while he works the blade. The skin peels away with a wet hiss, revealing ribs and sinew and the promise of stew. He gives you a share, small but generous. You'll stretch it with barley and leeks. You'll make it last. While he cleans the rest, he tells a story, an old one, about a village that ate nothing but tree bark one winter. They ground it into flour, baked it into cakes. He says their mouths bled, their bellies cramped, but they lived. You don't know if it's true, but you believe it anyway. Dinner that night is the hare stew. You boil the meat with leeks, a few root scraps, and a piece of fatback for richness. The scent is intoxicating, gamey green, slightly sweet from the vegetables. You let it simmer all evening. The steam fills the house, fogging the windows, warming the walls. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. The hare is chewy but tender enough. The broth is thick and coats your mouth with flavor. You chew the cartilage, suck the marrow from the smaller bones. You wipe your bowl clean with a crust of bread and sit back with a long breath. Someone passes around a tiny cup of spiced wine, just a sip, just enough to feel it. You swallow and feel the heat spread through your chest, your face, your fingertips. The spice is faint, just cinnamon and clove, but it makes you feel like royalty for a moment. Later, near the fire, someone produces preserved walnuts, honeyed and dark. You're handed two. You crack one open with a stone and eat the soft meat inside. Sweet, a little waxy. The second you save. You don't know for what. But some part of you believes there'll be a time when it matters more. You lie down, belly full, body heavy, heart quiet. The snow continues outside. It's quiet but not lonely. The house is warm. The stew pot is empty. Tomorrow you'll start again. And though the hunger never fully disappears tonight, it has retreated. Curled up in a corner, waiting its turn. But for now you've won. One more meal. One more night. One more breath between you and the bite of the cold. In the medieval world, that's not just survival, that's triumph. The snow has stopped, but the world outside is a quiet one muffled under its new white skin. You wake to a faint blue light creeping through the shutters and the eerie silence that only follows a heavy snowfall. The fire is barely alive, just a warm stone and a few blackened coals. You blow gently, feed it a curl of bark, then twigs. It answers slowly, reluctantly, but it answers. You sit for a while, knees pulled up to your chest, staring into the small flames. There's a stillness to these mornings, a calm that feels like reverence. You're not hungry yet, not fully. That comes soon enough. But for now, you're simply aware of your breath, of your limbs, of the weight of the blanket on your shoulders, and the lingering taste of salt on your tongue from last night's stew. When you finally rise, you head to the larder again. The air in there bites at your cheeks. The clay jars are cold to the touch. You open one pickled cabbage, sharp, vinegary, still firm. You scoop out a small handful shake off the brine and pop a piece into your mouth. It crunches. Sour, pungent, alive. You eat more than you mean to. For breakfast, you boil barley with a few of those preserved cabbage leaves, a pinch of dried dill, and just a splash of ale. The result is thick, salty, with a tang that wakes you up better than any sun. You spoon it slowly, burning your tongue once, twice. Worth it. The warmth spreads through you like an ember catching straw. You think about scurvy, how sailors get it, how soldiers get it, how poor folk in winter feel its bite. Gums, swelling teeth, loosening skin, breaking open without warning. You don't know the science, but you've seen the symptoms. You've known people who bled out from nothing but lack. That's why the pickled things matter. They sting your tongue and make your eyes water, but they keep your body from unraveling. Later in the morning, you go walking. The sky is pale, the sun weak and low. The air smells clean, cleaner than you remember it ever smelling. A few neighbors are out clearing paths, checking roofs. You stop to talk with an old woman tending her smokehouse. She's drying fish, tiny ones, strung together like beads on a necklace, their silver skin turned papery and gray. She offers you one. You chew it whole bones and all. It's salty, brittle, and fishy in the extreme. But it's food. She tells you about when she was young, and her mother made snow bread, a batter of flour water, and ashes from the fire, baked flat on a stone and eaten with lard. It was gray, she says. Gray like the sky, gray like your hands after a day in the fields. You smile. You've eaten gray food too, many times. You help her chop wood for a while. It's a fair trade, an armload of dried peas in exchange for your work. You thank her, tuck the small sack into your cloak, and head home heart lifted just a little. Peas mean soup. Peas mean options. Lunch is a triumph of the small. You boil the dried peas with crushed garlic barley and a bit of bone scrap for flavor. The pot bubbles and froths and fills the house with a scent you didn't realize you missed. Rich, herbal, savory. You add vinegar to brighten it, a trick passed down from someone else's grandmother. You ladle yourself a bowl and eat standing near the fire, watching the steam rise from the pot. You share a second bowl with a child from the cottage next door. She eats without a word, cheeks pink from cold hands cupped tight around the wooden bowl. When she's done, she thanks you and leaves. You save the rest for supper. In the quiet afternoon, you clean your tools grindstone for your blade wax for your boots. You slice some onions to dry, scatter them near the fire, and set aside the papery skins for broth. Every part of everything has a second use. As dusk falls, you fetch the last of your dried apples. You eat one slowly, each bite a memory of sun and warm wind. You chew thoughtfully, letting the leathery sweetness sit on your tongue. These aren't snacks. These are relics. Supper is the rest of the pea soup reheated, thickened, salted again. It's better now. Time has done what spices couldn't. The flavors are rounder, deeper. You tear a piece of bread still dry and dip it in. It softens, breaks apart. You lick the broth from your fingers. Someone knocks. A neighbor this time, bringing a treat, a square of sweetened oat cake, dense and molasses dark. You share it by the fire, cutting it into careful pieces, each one no bigger than a coin. It's chewy and fragrant, the sweetness almost medicinal. You both smile in the firelight, your teeth sticking slightly together with each bite. Night comes quietly. Snow still rests thick outside, but your belly is full, your hands are warm, and the fire hasn't gone out. You lie back with a wool blanket over your shoulders and a log hissing gently in the hearth. You close your eyes, and as you drift towards sleep, the day folds itself behind you like a well-wrapped bundle, tight, neat, just enough. Tomorrow will ask for more. But tonight, you've given enough. You've cooked, you've eaten, you've kept the dark at bay. And in the medieval world, that's the shape of peace. The wind is louder today, howling actually. It howls down, chimneys, rattles, shutters, lifts corners of thatch, and makes them flap like old cloth. You wake to it, pressing against the walls, a cold breath that seeps through every gap. The fire's gone out. You'd hoped the coals might last another night, but they've given up. You sit up slowly, teeth chattering, joints stiff, your blanket clinging with a faint smell of sweat smoke and cabbage. There's no comfort in the air, but you move anyway. Habit. Survival. You gather kindling with fingers that barely bend, coax a spark from flint and steel, and breathe gently until the fire agrees to return. When it does, you hold your hands over it and listen to the wind moan like a grieving widow. Food is first. It always is. You scrape together what little you have, a small chunk of dried meat hard as wood, the last of your pea flour, a bit of onion saved from yesterday. You mash it all together with water and set it to simmer. It bubbles without joy, but it bubbles, and that's enough. The stew is bland but warm. You chew slowly, letting each bite last, knowing full well there won't be much else today. You've been here before. The edge of hunger. Not starvation, not yet. But the beginning of the slope. You step outside later, bundled, cautious. Snowdrifts lean high against fences. Trees groan under their burden. The smoke from chimneys twists strangely in the air, flattened by the wind. You head toward the woodshed, slipping once, catching yourself with a frozen hand. You need more wood. You need more everything. Inside again, you thaw before the fire. The stew sits in the pot, cooling now. You stretch it with water, thin it with another onion skin, turn it into a broth for later. You've become good at this, turning full meals into shadows of themselves, stretching time and taste like tallow from a rendered bone. You remember distantly the fear of rotten food, the whispered tales of poisoned pies of meat crawling with unseen worms. You remember how cautious you were, how closely you sniffed each bite. You're still cautious, but now the risk isn't decay, it's absence. There's nothing left to spoil. The larder isn't empty yet, but it's close enough to show its bones. The villagers talk less now. Everyone is focused inward, heads down, tasks first. Jokes are thin, conversations short. You nod when you pass someone, and they nod back as if to say, yes, still here, still standing, still fighting the same cold, the same hunger. You go out again at midday this time to the hen house. One egg, just one, still warm from the body that made it, a miracle. You carry it back inside, cupped in your hands like a treasure. You boil it gently, careful not to crack the shell. When it's done, you peel it slowly, the shell flaking into your palm like crumbling plaster. You salt it lightly, just a pinch. Then you eat it in 3 bites, each one careful, reverent. It's soft, rich, slightly sulfurous, and gone too quickly. In the afternoon, you pass the time rendering lard over the fire. The smell is heavy, clinging to hair, to clothes, to the walls. But it's valuable. Fat is warmth. Fat is calories. You pour the golden liquid into a jar, seal it, and set it aside like treasure. A spoonful of it in soup will mean the difference between a meal and a memory. Dinner is a broth made from leftover bones, a wilted carrot, and a scrap of rye bread toasted until nearly black. You dip it in the broth, let it fall apart, then drink it down slowly. It's not enough, but it fills the space. Afterwards, a neighbor stops by. She brings 3 small apples, wrinkled, soft, but sweet. You trade a spoonful of lard. You each pretend it's a good deal, and maybe it is. You cut one apple into slices, roasted on the hearth, until the edges brown and blister. The smell is almost luxurious. You savor each bite as if it were your last. As night falls, the wind rises again. You pack straw around the bottom of the door, stuff rags into the window cracks, then wrap yourself in every blanket you own. The fire pops gently, casting slow-moving shadows. You think about all the meals you've eaten this winter. The dried fish, the pickled cabbage, the lentil mush, the stewed rabbit, the bark-thick bread. You think of the people you shared them with, the people you watched go without, the ones who never made it past Michaelmas. And you understand something now. Hunger isn't just absence. It's a teacher. A cruel one, yes, but a clear one. It teaches you to value what survives, to protect what nourishes, to see food not as a right, but as a fragile, fleeting grace. You lie back slowly, eyes on the beam above you, listening to the crackle of fire, the whistle of wind, the faint creak of the roof straining under snow. And you think tomorrow will be another day of finding, making, stretching, and surviving. But for now, you've made it through another day. The fire is low now, but steady. Its glow casts long shadows across the floor, flickering gently like the breath of sleep itself. You're lying in your blanket head, resting on a pillow that smells faintly of straw and wool. Your body is tired, your stomach not quite full, but calm. There's no urgency left tonight. No tasks waiting. No pots to scrub or embers to stoke. Just quiet. You close your eyes and breathe in the warm, smoky air. It carries with it traces of every meal you've cooked. The barley, the onions, the pickled cabbage, the meat rare but remembered. Even now, your senses hold those memories gently, like heirlooms. They remind you of where you've been, of what you've endured. Outside, the wind is quieter. Snow hushes the world like a hand pressed gently over a mouth. Nothing moves. No footsteps. No voices. Just the slow rhythm of breath. Yours, the houses, the winds. Your muscles soften. Your thoughts like smoke curl upward and vanish. You are warm enough, safe enough. You've eaten. You've endured. You've earned this rest. Let yourself drift. Let your body fall heavy. Let the stillness take you. And know that even in the hardest of winters, there is warmth to be found in a bowl of stew, in a crust of bread, in the soft sounds of sleep. You are here. You are alive. And you've made it through another day.